Priests have stood in this cemetery and said the words, "Unto God we commend this body." But those gathered around the grave knew in their heart of hearts that was not the truth. They knew their loved one had one more obstacle to overcome before reaching the afterlife. The cemetery rats. The mayor declared that the situation was now under control and no longer a concern. But who believes those in power? Under the cemetery live rats in caves they dug out themselves with miles of connecting tunnels crisscrossing the whole hillside. These were no ordinary rats. These were ship's rats. They came ashore when ships docked in the town. Their sheer size, intelligence, viciousness and clan-like behavior meant they infested the town almost instantly. Before long their numbers started to multiply, and these rats were ruthless predators. And they knew exactly what they were doing. They soon realized that they were living next door to an underground cold meat storage depot. The cemetery. The rats could sense the vibrations caused by the digging of a fresh grave, and straight away they would start digging towards that area, not stopping until they reached the coffin. With their razor-sharp teeth, they would gnaw through the wood, then drag the corpse back into the maze of tunnels and set about the feast on the dead. But there was someone else who defiled the dead in the town, but in a very different way, and his name was James Trefethen. He was one of the town's undertakers, but he hated the town. He always dreamt of leaving and emigrating to the new lands, to start afresh with some serious money behind him. But where is this money going to come from? Well, his dead clients. All the precious and sentimental jewelry placed on the deceased by their families so their loved ones could take it to the grave. Except it never got that far. It ended up in Trefethen's safe. He would then deliver the nailed up coffin to the cemetery under the grieving eyes of the family. He had already amassed a small fortune in this wicked way, but there was one thing he wanted more than anything else, and when he got his hands on it, he would leave this town and never come back again. The thing he wanted was a sapphire ring. It belongs to an old sea captain. Everyone knew he had been involved in piracy in his youth, and that is how he came across this ring that now adorned his finger. The old sea dog eventually died, but it was a rival undertaker that was employed. So Trefethen went along to the funeral service, and sure enough, before they closed up the coffin he saw that ring still on the dead man's finger. He could not believe his luck. There and then he made his mind up. He was now prepared to act in a very desperate way. He will rob the grave to get it, and do it quickly. So that very night in the swirling mist, carrying his pick and spade, he quietly made his way back to the cemetery. First to remove the headstone, and then he started digging. 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4. He had to work hard and fast. 5 foot, 6 foot. Then his spade hit the top of the coffin. Taking a crowbar he ripped the lid off, the wood splintering as he did so. Slowly he lowered his lantern into the coffin so he could look inside. He could not believe it. The coffin was empty. Wait, he suddenly saw something. A movement at the top of the coffin. A pair of feet were slowly disappearing into a hole at the top of the coffin. Well, the cemetery rats had almost beaten him to it. He was not going to be outdone by those vermin, now that he was so close to getting his hands on that ring. Trefethen quickly jumped down into the coffin. He grabbed hold of the corpse's ankles and started to pull the body back with all his strength. The rats, well, they were huge and strong and powerful and many in number. Slowly, inch by inch, they dragged the corpse further back into their tunnel with Trefethen still holding on to those ankles. He found himself being pulled in two. He never realized how strong they were, but he was not going to give up his obsession for that ring, now that he was so close to getting it. He had the corpse by its ankles. He reached further up to the knees, up to the waist, crawling along the tunnel after them as the soil just fell around him. The commotion caused by those rats grew and grew as they could sense a live human in amongst them. They were now being driven crazy with this bloodlust. They just lunged out of the darkness, moving like a living black carpet, their razor-sharp teeth just ripping his clothes and biting into his flesh. He could feel pain stabbing at him from all sides. He desperately held on with just one thing on his mind. In the darkness he felt for the corpse's hand and that finger withering on it. There it was. Frantically now he tried to twist the ring off the finger. He twisted and struggled until finally it slips off the dead man's finger and into his own hand. At last he has it. He had to back up quickly. The rats, well, they had gone berserk. The stench of the decomposing corpse was on their breath and their heavy bodies were slamming into him. He felt pain everywhere now as the rats ripped and slashed him with their teeth and claws, going for his jugular vein, trying to sever his windpipe. The pain of his wounds was only a secondary thought to him now, as this new fear shot through him. He had to get out of there before those rats ate him alive. Desperately, he starts reversing back down the tunnel, crawling faster and faster as the rats swarmed after him. He went faster and faster, further and further back until he was in the coffin. He rose up, but that coffin lid was shut. In that very instant he realized in his panic, he must have reversed down the wrong tunnel and back into a wrong coffin, and was now trapped there as hundreds of rats bounded in with him. A few seconds later his body was covered with the creatures as more scurried out of the darkness, the smell of blood growing stronger and stronger. That is how James Trefethen died. There was no one there to hear his screams as the rats ate him alive. They drained his body of blood, gnawed his flesh until there was little left but gristle and bone. It didn't take them long, because there were so many of them. The next day, when the town policeman came up to investigate, well, he just came across an open grave with a huge hole in the coffin, and he soon realized, no matter what the mayor had said, those rats were still a problem, and it looked like they had a grave robber at the same time. Well, nothing could be done except to put dirt back in the grave and lay the gravestone on top. Several days passed, and soon people began to realize that they have not seen James Trefethen in a long time. Perhaps he was ill, so they broke into his premises but found no one. They opened his safe and found a lot of their loved ones' valuable belongings. Well, now they knew what game Trefethen had been playing for years, and also knew who their grave robber was. But that ring still lies somewhere here buried in the cemetery, as do the remains of James Trefethen, the only person never officially buried here. They say he will rise to look for the ring, but this is just a ghost story. Thank you for listening to my ghostly tale. Good night out there. Whatever you are.